Tyler James Robinson had no criminal record, no military training, and no known extremist affiliations. Yet on September 10, 2025, this 22-year-old Mormon from small-town Utah climbed onto a university roof with a rifle and custom-engraved bullets to assassinate one of America's most prominent conservative voices. The investigation that followed would reveal not just how he did it, but expose the disturbing ease with which political rage can transform into deadly action. Charlie Kirk stood before roughly 3,000 students in the outdoor courtyard at Utah Valley University in Orem. The 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA was doing what he did best, challenging college students to debate him in his Prove Me Wrong tour. 6 university police officers monitored the crowd. Kirk's own security detail flanked the makeshift stage. The sun was bright, the atmosphere charged with the typical energy of political discourse on a college campus. At approximately 12:10 p.m. Mountain Time, a single rifle shot cracked through the air. The bullet struck Kirk in the neck. The crowd's energy turned to panic in an instant. Students scattered in every direction, some dropping to the ground, others running blindly away from the stage. The university police rushed toward Kirk, but there was nothing they could do. The prominent conservative activist, the man President Trump would later credit with delivering unprecedented youth votes in his election victory, was mortally wounded. What made this assassination particularly chilling was its surgical precision. One shot, one casualty. No spray of bullets into the crowd, no mass shooting scenario that had become grimly familiar in American life. This was targeted, deliberate, and executed with a marksman's accuracy from a distance that made immediate response impossible. The shooter had positioned himself on the roof of the Low-C Student Success Center, an adjacent building that provided clear sightlines to the courtyard below. From that elevated position, he had waited for his moment, then vanished into the chaos he created. By the time first responders reached Kirk, the assassin had already begun his escape, leaving behind a crime scene that would challenge investigators to piece together not just the how, but the why of this political murder. Utah Department of Public Safety immediately secured the scene. The courtyard became a massive crime scene, with investigators cordoning off not just the immediate area where Kirk fell, but expanding their perimeter to include the surrounding buildings. 2 men found near the scene were quickly detained, but just as quickly released when it became clear they had no connection to the shooting. The real killer had disappeared into a campus of thousands, leaving investigators with a daunting task. Within minutes of the shooting, every law enforcement agency in Utah mobilized. The FBI arrived approximately 16 minutes after the shot was fired, immediately taking joint command with state and local authorities. Utah Valley University went into immediate lockdown, canceling all classes and issuing emergency alerts to students and staff. The investigation's first critical break came from the campus's extensive surveillance network. Security cameras had captured a figure in dark clothing, baseball cap, and sunglasses moving with purpose through the campus immediately after the shooting. The footage showed him climbing down from the Low-C Center using an external ladder, his movements deliberate but unhurried. He knew exactly where the cameras were and seemed unconcerned about being recorded. By Thursday morning, less than 24 hours after the assassination, the FBI made a crucial decision. They released still images from the surveillance footage to the public. The photos showed the suspect's partial face, his distinctive gait, and most importantly, his escape route. The images were everywhere within hours, on every news channel, every social media platform, every law enforcement bulletin in the western United States. The FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the suspect's capture. Utah authorities established checkpoints on major highways leaving the valley. Colorado and neighboring states heightened their alert status. The manhunt had become one of the largest in recent memory, with resources pouring in from federal, state, and local agencies. But even as the official investigation proceeded, a parallel and more chaotic hunt was unfolding online. Social media exploded with theories, accusations, and critically misinformation. False identities began circulating almost immediately. Someone claimed the shooter was Michael Mallinson, a name that turned out to be completely fabricated. Another viral post identified him as George Zinn, equally fictitious. A doctored image showed someone in a Democratic Socialists of America t-shirt claiming this was the assassin. An old video from a July incident in Nevada was repurposed, with users claiming it showed Kirk's killer escaping. The misinformation threatened to overwhelm the real investigation. Every false lead had to be investigated and debunked, consuming precious resources and time. The Dallas Morning News and other fact-checkers worked overtime to separate truth from fiction, but the damage was spreading faster than it could be contained. Meanwhile, the real investigation was proceeding methodically. Forensic teams had made a disturbing discovery at the crime scene. The bullet that killed Kirk wasn't just any ammunition. It had been custom engraved. When investigators found additional rounds, they discovered each bore messages. Ciao Bella on one, hey fascist, catch on another. These weren't the actions of a random shooter or someone caught up in momentary rage. This was premeditated, planned, and deeply personal. The engraved bullets transformed the investigation. FBI spokespersons noted publicly that these taunts linked the suspect's mindset to far-left anti-fascist sentiment, though they were careful to note that no organized group had claimed responsibility. The inscriptions suggested someone who saw Kirk not just as a political opponent, but as an enemy worthy of death. Ballistics analysis confirmed that all rounds came from the same weapon, a scoped, magazine-fed bolt-action rifle. The weapon had been modified with camouflage paint and what appeared to be a suppressor-like stock, though investigators noted the single shot had still been clearly audible across the campus. The trajectory analysis definitively placed the shooter on the roof of the Losi Center, confirming what the surveillance footage had suggested. Crime scene investigators found shell casings on the rooftop, along with other trace evidence that would later prove crucial. The shooter had been careful, but not perfect. In his haste to escape, he had left behind enough forensic evidence to build a case, if only they could find him. The digital investigation was proceeding in parallel. Beyond the surveillance footage, investigators were combing through social media, looking for anyone who had made threats against Kirk or expressed violent intentions toward conservative figures. The scope was overwhelming. Kirk had been a polarizing figure with countless online detractors. Sorting genuine threats from political hyperbole was a monumental task. But the investigation was about to take an unexpected turn. As the FBI photos circulated wider and wider, they reached someone who recognized more than just a face. They reached someone who recognized a son. Tyler James Robinson's father saw the FBI photographs and knew immediately. The young man in the surveillance footage, the one climbing down from the roof where Charlie Kirk's assassin had fired, was his son. According to later reports, Robinson had already confessed to his father, adding another layer of agony to an already devastating revelation. Robinson didn't fit the profile investigators might have expected. He was 22 years old, from Washington, Utah, a small city near St. George, roughly 240 miles south of the crime scene. He came from what officials described as a devout Republican family. His voter registration showed no party affiliation, and his status was inactive. He hadn't voted in recent elections. The Democratic Socialists of America quickly confirmed he had never been a member, despite viral claims to the contrary. What Robinson did have was a documented interest in firearms. His social media showed him firing high-powered rifles for sport, though nothing that predicted an attack. Family members told investigators that Robinson had become more political recently, that he had disparaged Kirk as full of hate, but there were no red flags that suggested he was planning violence. The family faced an impossible decision. Their son had committed an unthinkable act, but he was still their son. Working with a youth pastor, Robinson's father began the delicate process of convincing Tyler to surrender. Governor Spencer Cox would later praise both the family and the faith leader for their role in preventing further violence or a potentially deadly confrontation with law enforcement. The digital evidence against Robinson was mounting even before his surrender. Investigators discovered that shortly after the shooting, Robinson had posted on Discord, joking about being the gunman. Friends initially assumed it was an unrelated dark humor meme, until Robinson's mother told one acquaintance that Tyler had admitted to the shooting. The casual cruelty of that post, making light of having just committed murder, would become a key piece of evidence. On the evening of September 11, 2025, approximately 34 hours after the assassination, Tyler Robinson surrendered to authorities. He turned himself in to a U.S. Marshal near Hurricane, Utah, not far from his family's home. The manhunt that had consumed the nation's attention for 2 days was over. The arrest itself was anticlimactic. No dramatic confrontation, no last stand. Robinson simply gave himself up, brought to that moment by his father's persuasion and perhaps the weight of what he had done. Utah police announced his custody in a televised briefing that night, with officials confirming they had their suspected shooter. But even as Robinson was being booked into Utah County Jail, controversies were emerging about the investigation's handling. FBI Director Kash Patel had posted on social media earlier that day claiming a suspect was in custody, then had to retract when local officials confirmed the shooter was still at large. The premature announcement raised questions about communication between federal and state authorities and would later trigger congressional hearings about FBI leadership. Robinson was charged with aggravated murder, weapons charges, and obstruction of justice, the latter relating to reports that he had moved and hidden the murder weapon after the attack. Under Utah law, aggravated murder in the course of certain felonies could carry the death penalty. President Trump, in a Fox News interview, stated he hoped Robinson would get the death penalty. Governor Cox, while more measured, noted that all options under Utah law were being considered. The physical evidence connecting Robinson to the crime was overwhelming. When investigators executed a search warrant at his Washington, Utah home, they seized weapons, including the rifle that ballistics would confirm as the murder weapon. They found electronics that corroborated the Discord posts. Most damning of all, they matched the custom-engraved ammunition to online purchases Robinson had made. With Robinson in custody, investigators could begin piecing together the fuller picture of how a young man with no criminal history had become a political assassin. The evidence painted a picture of meticulous planning combined with ideological rage. The ammunition alone told a story. Robinson had ordered the custom-engraved bullets online, having them specifically inscribed with his messages. This wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden decision. He had planned this attack, prepared for it, and wanted his victim to know why he was dying, even if Kirk would never see the messages etched on the bullets that killed him. The rifle had been legally purchased and modified. The camouflage paint and stock modifications suggested someone who had studied tactical shooting, though Robinson had no formal military training. His social media history showed him at shooting ranges, practicing with high-powered rifles. In retrospect, what looked like a hobby had been preparation. The choice of venue was strategic. Robinson had likely studied Kirk's touring schedule, knew about the outdoor venue at UVU, and recognized the vulnerability it presented. The low-C center roof provided ideal sightlines and multiple escape routes. He had done his homework. But for all the planning, Robinson had made crucial mistakes. The Discord post was pure hubris, a moment of dark pride that provided investigators with digital confirmation of his guilt. His escape route, while initially successful, had been fully captured on surveillance cameras, and ultimately, his own family became the key to his capture. The investigation also revealed what Robinson wasn't. He wasn't part of any organized group, wasn't following orders, wasn't part of some larger conspiracy. This was what experts call a lone wolf attack, inspired by political hatred but executed alone. No international terrorism, no extremist cell, just one young man with a rifle and a rage he couldn't contain. The assassination immediately became a flashpoint in America's already combustible political climate. In Congress, Speaker Mike Johnson called for a moment of silence for Kirk. What should have been a solemn moment devolved into chaos, with some members walking out and others refusing to participate. Video of the disruption went viral, with each side claiming the other had dishonored Kirk's memory. The reaction split largely along partisan lines, though both sides officially condemned the violence. Conservative media framed Kirk as a martyr to free speech, killed for exercising his First Amendment rights. Liberal commentators, while condemning the murder, pointed to what they called the dangerous rhetoric that had inflamed political tensions. Some went too far. MSNBC analyst Matthew Dowd was fired after suggesting Kirk's hateful statements had contributed to his own death. The corporate world wasn't immune to the controversy. An Office Depot employee was terminated for refusing to print memorial flyers for Kirk. Delta Airlines suspended staff members who made tasteless comments about the assassination on social media. Schools, retailers, and other institutions found themselves disciplining employees for their reactions to the killing, creating a secondary controversy about free speech and workplace rights. The political violence context couldn't be ignored. Reuters reported that Kirk's assassination came amid a watershed moment in U.S. political violence, with roughly 150 politically motivated attacks in the first half of 2025 alone, double the previous year's rate. John Lewis of George Washington University warned that extreme political violence is increasingly becoming the norm, with 300 such incidents recorded since January 2021. The fear among security experts was the potential for copycat attacks or retaliatory violence. Liliana Mason of Johns Hopkins commented that perpetrators often wait to strike until someone else started it, raising concerns that Kirk's assassination could trigger a cycle of political killings. Utah alone saw multiple threats against political figures in the days following the shooting, though none materialized into actual attacks. President Trump's response was particularly notable. Beyond his personal condemnation and call for the death penalty, he credited Kirk with delivering crucial youth votes in his 2024 election victory. Vice President J.D. Vance personally accompanied Kirk's widow Erica on Air Force Two as Kirk's casket was flown back to Arizona. The federal government's response underscored how this wasn't being treated as just another murder, but as an attack on the political system itself. The FBI faced its own controversy. Director Patel's premature announcement about having a suspect in custody raised questions about whether political pressure had influenced the investigation. Senate hearings were scheduled to examine the FBI's handling of the case, with Democrats questioning whether Patel's connections to the Trump administration had compromised the Bureau's independence. Even the legal proceedings became politically charged. Robinson's family reported he had become deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology, though investigators found no connections to any organized leftist groups. The absence of formal extremist ties made the case harder to categorize. Was this terrorism, a hate crime, or simply murder with a political motive? As Robinson awaited trial, charged with aggravated murder and facing a potential death sentence, the questions raised by Kirk's assassination remained largely unanswered. How had a young man from a conservative family become radicalized to the point of murder? Could the attack have been prevented with better security? And most troublingly, was this the beginning of a new wave of political violence, or could it serve as a wake-up call to step back from the brink? What was certain was that on September 10, 2025, American political discourse had crossed a terrible line. Charlie Kirk had been killed not for what he had done, but for what he believed and said. The investigation had been swift and successful. Robinson was captured, the evidence was overwhelming, and justice would proceed through the courts. But the deeper wounds exposed by this assassination, the political hatred, the online radicalization, the ease with which rage became murder, would take far longer to heal. The custom-engraved bullets that killed Charlie Kirk had carried a message of hate. The investigation that followed had delivered a message of its own, that even in an era of deep political division, the rule of law could still function, evidence could still matter, and justice, however imperfect, could still be pursued. Whether that would be enough to prevent the next Tyler Robinson from picking up a rifle remained an open and urgent question.